instead of being like, let me judge the prize based on everything I've ever heard about it in my life and read and that kind of thing, I'm going to evaluate these prizes in relation to me and my background and that kind of thing. So this is my thoughts / preference for the Wolf Prize in Physics v. the Nobel Prize in Physics. And I've talked about the Wolf Prize in Physics before and the Nobel Prize in Physics and kind of both. So I was like, let's do a V. V versus, okay. So here I, Tanis Coralee of Seattle, share my thoughts / preference for the Wolf Prize in Physics versus the Nobel Prize in Physics, including which I would prefer to win first if I were to win both. So, it says I'm going to evaluate, so here based on real stuff that's already happened. So I'm going to talk through this, talking through for my February 2017 first author publication in peer-reviewed journal High Energy Density Physics. So I previously said with that one, let's say my affiliation or changed to on the article or changed to Microsoft. So if my affiliation on the article were Microsoft, would the prize travel and present it at Microsoft in Redmond, Greater Seattle area? That way a little bit. That would be a first for my Duwamish Native American ancestors, original peoples in the Greater Seattle area, being presented with a prize at that level on the lands my ancestors stood on 5,000 years earlier as well. So I'm be like, well, in terms of incorporating my family, all right, that would be like if Microsoft were my affiliation and were presented, on ancient ancestral Duwamish lands, that would be great notability for my Duwamish ancestors. And our name and our peoples. All right, so there's a little bit of, sometimes it's like, can either procure that? Okay, so which would I prefer? The Wolf Prize has more of a technical reputation. So perhaps the Wolf Prize, like I like things that are kind of more technical. So in that sense, in terms of reputation, and for the particular work that I'm talking about of mine, perhaps the Wolf Prize. However, the Nobel Prize may be better if emphasis / voice was given to my Native American family at the time of my winning the prize. Channel the reputation of it being less technical, relatively, into constructive image promotion of my ethnicities. So a lot of people like the Nobel Prize because it's like it reaches a really broad audience and that kind of thing. However, the kind of trade-off there is a loss of like technical reputation. So it's like taking the kind of trade-off and being like, well, let's maximize that and see if I can, instead of it just being kind of like meh, being like, can it bring some of my ethnicities like to the front for the broader part? Because a lot of the world doesn't even know what a Native American is, which is sad, considering how many people live in the United States of America. In kind of the United States of America on the global stage, they probably should know what the original peoples of this place are. Okay, like a basic education sense. Okay. Which would I prefer to win? So that's that. Those are more thoughts than preference. So really, I have like one preference in that. That's why it's thoughts / preference. So which would I prefer to win first? This is my preference. This is a great. Whichever gets to me first. So I do have a concrete preference. Whichever gets to me first. Okay. And then does my preference for one or the other, and this is the other closest I get, though it's not, I haven't reached a conclusion on this, so it's more thoughts than preference. Does my preference for one over the other, or their ordering, change depending on my surname? So this is actually something back I kind of thought about in the 2010s decade. And one name that I kind of was like, if I went up my family tree, Tanis Gillespie. And like if I had to have a middle name, maybe Tanis Gordon Gillespie, which maybe I'll do a video on that. But so that was last decade, 2010s. And so this is actually something I thought about back then, because I published that article back in, or it was published back in February 2017. So and it's now August 2025. So which prize does Tanis Coralee prefer? Perhaps the Nobel Prize. And which prize does Tanis Leonhardi prefer currently? Perhaps the Wolf Prize. And so this was actually a unique one in this ruminating about surnames last decade as well as this decade. Is the preference is actually different depending on if I'm Tanis Coralee or Tanis Leonhardi, which was the same last decade. And I was like, I should remember that. And so here I am remembering that and delivering that in terms of it actually is different depending on the surname. So there we go. That's my thoughts / preference for the Wolf Prize in Physics v. the Nobel Prize in Physics.